As we have explained in earlier videos, after a jurisdiction receives its RENA allocation, which is the number of new housing units that must be zoned for in the next 8 years, they must then update their housing element. As part of this process, jurisdictions do what is called rezoning. Rezoning is how locations are identified for new housing units included in a jurisdiction's updated housing plan. A new law that took effect on January 1st, 2022, AB 1398, is now requiring most jurisdictions in the Southern California region to drastically accelerate rezoning to avoid stiff penalties from the state. California housing law requires all cities to submit their updated housing elements to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, by a certain date. For Orange County, that date was October 15, 2021. HCD then reviews the housing element and either certifies it or sends it back to the jurisdiction to revise. Jurisdictions must conduct a public outreach process before adopting their housing element. The law provides for a 120-day grace period to give jurisdictions a chance to work with the public and HCD to obtain certification. If HCD did not certify a jurisdiction's housing plan within the grace period, which for Orange County ended February 11, 2022, the new rezoning accelerated timeline in AB 1398 applies. The law shortened the rezoning timeline from 3 years to 1 year after the statutory due date for jurisdictions that do not receive timely certification. Only 6 jurisdictions had certified housing elements by the February 11, 2022 deadline, and none of those were in Orange County. That means 191 SoCal jurisdictions are subject to the accelerated rezoning mandated by AB 1398. So, how did this happen? Orange County jurisdictions put forth their best efforts to submit fully compliant housing elements by the deadline and have worked closely with HCD to address critiques and concerns raised. However, formal guidance from HCD for how cities must address complicated matters like affirmatively furthering fair housing in their plans took longer than expected. There continues to be a lack of published guidelines explaining how to comply with the new law. The lack of clear information bogged down the process, and some jurisdictions decided to approve their housing element prior to receiving certification from HCD, in hopes that by doing so, they would avoid triggering the accelerated rezoning requirement. How exactly AB 1398 affects the Southern California region remains unclear. Therefore, jurisdictions are planning for zoning changes without knowing if or how their plan might need to change to meet HCD's comments due to the new law. The unknowns increase the administration cost for a jurisdiction's planning department, which is either planning for parallel scenarios or starting over and accelerate efforts even more to meet the deadline. So what's at stake? Violations of the state housing laws can lead to serious, immediate midterm and long-term consequences. An immediate consequence is the requirement that jurisdictions must approve a development for very low or moderate income household, even if it is inconsistent with zoning and general plan standards, if the site is included in an adopted housing element. Per state law, the rezoning process requires environmental review that includes the traffic impacts and greenhouse gas emissions from new development. This review can take 6 months to complete, which is followed by a public hearing process. Once a jurisdiction's certification is 120 days past due, which is the case for 191 Southern California jurisdictions, they lose access to state funding sources to support the production of housing. This has dire consequences for jurisdictions who need funding for the very housing projects required by state law. The most serious and long-term consequences is litigation that can lead to substantial monthly fines and the loss of local land use authority for persistent noncompliance. California's housing laws are numerous and complicated, with staff and resources stretched thin, working together to understand the issues and develop creative solutions that encourage a variety of housing types for all income levels, while honoring the uniqueness of Orange County's neighborhoods is imperative to sustain Orange County as a great place to live, work, and play. Housing Orange County, an OCOG and ACCOC education collaboration. To see more videos on California housing policies and issues, visit www.ocog.com/housing.